Imagine a perfect world where you can build a restaurant, open the doors, and make loads of money. Unfortunately, those days are over. It takes great leadership, hard work, and long hours to operate a successful restaurant. Together, we can make it happen. This is Restauranttopia.
Welcome everyone that was able to join us today for our webinar on SBA loans and landlord-tenant issues. We really appreciate everyone being able to join us. We got an expert panel here, Jamie Romano, CFO at Hillcrest Foods, Nancy Valentine, an attorney at Miller Canfield, and Matt Yorkovich, an attorney at Yorkovich and Debo. On the panel with me here today, we also have David Ross, the COO at Hillcrest Foods, and our resident chef and all-around food expert, Anthony Hamilton.
Thanks. I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And this is important stuff that we're going to be going over, and a lot of it's fresh, and a lot of it's going to potentially change in the coming days. But we wanted to get this out as soon as possible, and we'll have some follow up, to anything that might be changing or flowing differently. But we wanted to get this information out so that local restaurants can take advantage of it and get the money that they need to keep operating.
No, thanks, Dave. I completely agree with that. We want to help local independent restaurants. You probably are working with a CPA, you're probably working with an attorney, but you maybe don't have one on staff. So this is an opportunity for you to kind of get some points, get some areas where you need to start working and reaching out to your bank and your lending institution for these funds and what to do as far as next steps. So hopefully this is informative. This is all new information, and there's some of it is changing, but you have to take action. You have to move forward. So I'll turn the microphone over to Jamie Romano, and he can start talking about the different SBA loans available to restaurant owners and what it looks like to get the process started.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. So we're going to be talking about the three main programs that are out there right now: the Paycheck Protection Program, the SBA Emergency $10,000 Grant, and then the SBA Disaster Loan. So the first one I want to go over is the Paycheck Protection Program. That's the one that everyone's been clamoring about. Some of the things to know about it is that there is a forgivable and then a potentially not forgivable and loan portion. So first I just want to go over the loan portion. So any part that is not forgiven is paid back over 2 years at 1% interest. There's an option to defer any payments of principal and interest. There is no guarantee, personal guarantee, nor is there any required collateral to be put up, which is huge. Any lender that is FDIC insured can do it, including existing SBA lenders. There are no fees charged to apply to the borrowers. And the whole purpose of this is they want small businesses to maintain their payroll and also be able to pay their existing rent or mortgages or utilities. There also is no prepayment penalty. So it's open to those employers who have 500 or fewer employees. For those chain restaurants that are out there, they are waiving the affiliation rules, so that if you have, say, 20 units with 50 employees, that would be more than 500. They're waiving that rule so that you can qualify to be under 500. You do have to have been in business, though, as of February 15th. So this is not eligible if you're either just starting your business now or started after that time. How they're coming up with the amount to fund is a calculation based on 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs. So what does that mean? Your payroll costs are, the definition is salary, wages, and commissions. For our customers, for restaurants, it's very important that they realize that tips are includable. So it is not just your wages that are paid to your individuals, it is also the tips that they are receiving. So it's very important that you make sure to include that. There are some other provisions about vacation and medical. The biggest thing you can do is get your payroll reports and your 941 payroll forms. That's where you're going to get the numbers that you're going to need. You're also able to include in your payroll costs any health care benefits that you may provide. And also if you happen to have any retirement, so a 401k, a simple plan for your employees. Now there is one thing that we were not able to get 100% clarification from. One piece that is includable is state and local taxes assessed on the compensation of your employees. So we posed a question actually directly to US Senator yesterday and about our state unemployment and workers' compensation, since those are state taxes, are those includable? And he honestly could not give us an answer. I am thinking that there is going to be guidance that that is includable, but that is still a pending issue.
Yeah, and Jamie, the banks may be able to identify that at the time of application as well.
And that's going on. There's been a lot of, this is a very fluid situation. The banks will know when you apply. So unfortunately, they're trying to, as our banker described it, they're trying to build the airplane as it's taxiing down the runway. So there are going to be some open things, and I will mention if it's open, but so far this is what we know. Now, this is an important key too. On the payroll costs, anyone paid in excess of a salary of $100,000, the portion above that $100,000 is not includable in the calculation. So if over the 12-month period, somebody was paid $120,000, you can include $100,000 of it, $20,000 of it is not includable. They're also not including employer taxes that are paid, like your FICA taxes or your FUTA tax. There is an open question. I've heard it a dozen different ways. Half people say it is includable, half don't. That is whether 1099 payments that you might make to people who are not earning wages from you, but maybe you're paying a 1099 for someone to come and clean your restaurant, and whether that's includable.
I would say, Jamie, that it looks like under the interim rules that the 1099 payments are not going to be includable in the calculation of payroll costs. And the only time it would be is if you are applying as an independent contractor or sole proprietor. You know, the karate studio down the street that's run by one person and, you know, he's had to close. He may be able to, he would be able to use the 1099 income, but it doesn't appear that it's going to be includable in payroll costs at the moment under the interim rules issued last night. But I agree with you. I am not an accountant, and you definitely want to check, but that's what it looks like at this point in time.
What I would recommend is that people gather the information anyways.
Agreed.
So that you have it available. And then when you do it, there is final guidance. I would agree with you, Nancy. I don't see why they would include it. But since the goal is to keep people employed and on wages, but in case it is, have the information available so that if it is, you can include it. So for the loan amount, it's take those average payroll costs for the entire year, get the monthly amount, multiply it by 2.5. So for instance, if your average monthly payroll cost is $100,000, 2.5 is $250,000. That's the amount you will be loaned, unless you decide to take less. This was guidance from our attorneys. It's that most employers will use when calculating their 12-month cost, will use their 2019 payroll, so the period January 1 to 12/31. I have seen otherwise that make more sense to use the 12-month period 4/1/19 to 3/31/20. I think you're actually going to be able to use both. That's going to be another question when applying for the bank as to which period to use. Either way, it's a 12-month period, but it's unknown as to exactly which one they're going to want to use. And this is key too. In case you started your restaurant later in the year, so maybe you opened in August or September or something, there's going to be a special calculation for you where employers who are not doing business as of February 15th, 2019, you're going to use a special period, which is January 1 of 2020 to February 29th of 2020 in order to calculate your average monthly cost. And that's so that they can get a more accurate cost, since you may not have been doing business the entire year. And then they also recommend use your 941 forms as your backup, as that's filed by your payroll companies if you have them, and that is going to show the wages on them. And that's going to be the documentation that the banks are going to rely on to verify that your numbers are accurate. The forgiveness portion, this is also very important. So when you get your loan proceeds, you have 8 weeks after you get the money where amounts paid towards payroll costs, which are the same costs when used to come up with the loan amount, and then any payment on interest of a mortgage obligation for your business, rent, or utilities, in that 8 weeks, that amount will be forgiven, meaning you do not have to pay it back. So again, in the scenario where you get $250,000, if you use $200,000 of it towards payroll, rent, and utilities, that portion is forgiven and does not need to be paid back. There is one caveat with that, which is that no more than 25% of that, of the forgiven part, can be for non-payroll, which would be the mortgage interest, the rent, and the utilities.
Hey, Jamie, can I ask one question?
Yeah, go ahead.
If someone had decided to use the money outside of these things, that's fine. It's just not forgiven. They would pay it back with the 2 years at the 1% interest. Is that correct?
As long as it's used for the business. So if it's used in a business manner, you cannot get the loan and then just take a distribution. I'm sure that would be frowned upon. But yes, if the unforgiven portion, if they use it to pay other bills of the business, then that's fine. It's just the unforgiven portion does have to be paid back. There is a second piece in terms of the forgiveness, and that is based on keeping the same number of what they call FTEs, or full-time equivalents. So they want to make sure that you are keeping people employed. And so it measures how many people did you have previously and how many people did you have now. For full-time equivalents, it's a computation to come up with, because especially in restaurants, you have a lot of part-time people. So if you have two people who work 20 hours a week, that counts as one full-time equivalent. And so there's a calculation that takes the number of people or full-time equivalents that you had during the 8 weeks where you have the loan, compares them to time period before, and depending on if you have fewer people, also a part of the loan will not be forgiven and needs to be paid back. There is also, and to make it slightly even more complicated, if you have a reduction of more than 25% of your employees' pay, so if somebody was making $1,000 a week, now they make $600, there is an additional calculation in terms of that portion not being forgiven. The real key, though, is for people to, not to make it too complicated, to get the money, use it to cover your payroll and your rent and your utilities. And then the forgiveness part, unfortunately, if things are not going as well as we'd hoped after they receive the money and you don't have as many employees, I would say you just deal with that then in terms of the part not being forgiven. The key will be to, in my mind, because there's only so much money, apply for it and get it. Now, how to request the forgiveness, It's just going to be a document at the end where you're going to submit your documents of the full-time equivalent number of people, your payroll, what you paid for rent and utilities, and then it's going to be computed what the forgiveness part is, and then the lender will then agree or disagree and come up with the figure. Here's what you need to know. Any bank, when you go to apply, can do this. It is not just SBA lenders, although they are already set up to do so. So I would recommend, if you have a relationship with your existing bank, that you do it through them. They are accepting applications. They were supposed to, at least. As of today, I have heard from multiple banks that they are pushing off till next week, and others like Huntington, they told me that they will be accepting them late afternoon today. In either case, go ahead.
Oh, on your point, as far as reaching out to your existing bank, I can't stress that enough. The bankers that I spoke to about 8 this week, and I go, do you want me to refer people to you who are looking for these loans? And they are so inundated with calls that they really need to focus on cultivating your existing banking relationship. So reach out to your banker, reach out to your CPA, reach out to your lawyer. But when you reach out to that banker, say, hey, put me on a list. I'm going to apply for one of these loans.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Brian, I had the similar experience with the certain bankers this morning, and the ones that do have like some application available, even if they're not quote live, you want to get in the queue to do that as soon as you can.
Agreed. Now they've allocated $349 billion to the program. The congressman we spoke with yesterday said that he believes that this is going to be vastly oversubscribed. And while they may then increase the amount, there is no guarantee. So again, important that you apply as soon as possible, because there is only so much money allocated. And although they may increase the amount that they are willing to allocate, there is no guarantee for that. So I would not wait. I know that a lot of restaurants are either closed or operating at a very diminished level. I would not wait, though, until things get better to apply for the program. I would do it now. Okay, certifications. You do have to certify on the application that there is a reason to support needing this loan. So if you are one of the few restaurants, I know some of our pizza accounts are doing really well. If your business is up, they're most likely not going to consider you for this program. So if your business is doing better than before, this is not just a program to give everyone money. This is for people who need it. And then the funds do need to be used for payroll, rent, utilities. There will be some cases where monies will not be used and therefore will turn into a loan, but they do not want people to take this money, keep the restaurant shut down, and then take distributions for themselves.
Can I also add, Jamie, just for sake of clarification, lease includes equipment leases. So I don't know if you're leasing all your restaurant equipment, it would qualify under the funds that it's allowable fund uses, as we understand it.
That's the way I understand it as well. That's an excellent point. Thank you for bringing it up.
Jamie, one question I want to make sure I understand. So if a restaurant currently is closed, you're saying that they should be applying for this money regardless right now?
The reason why I recommend it, because it obviously would be better for the restaurant in terms of, hey, if I'm going to open up in 4 weeks, I'd like to get the money in 4 weeks, because that's when I'm going to have the payroll. That's when I'm going to need the 8 weeks of forgiveness. The only reason I'm saying apply now is because we don't know how long the funds are going to last. And once they're allocated, there's no more. Now, the government may say, hey, we vastly underestimated the need, so we're going to take it from $350 billion to $700 billion or whatever. But I just would hate to tell someone, yeah, wait until you're going to open back up so you can use the funds towards payroll, and then they don't get any money. So that's the only reason why I'm saying, even for those restaurants that are operating at a diminished level, to apply now. Now, if there's any way that they could go to their banker, and I don't know if this is going to be possible, and say, here's my application, I'd like to be allocated the money, but can you please disperse it later? Because it's upon disbursement of the loan that the 8 weeks start. That would be amazing. I just don't know if that's going to be possible.
I just, Jamie, to that point, in my experience in the past, I know this is new for everyone, but I've never had an experience where I thought the bank moved too fast. So I would definitely get out there and move on getting this application in. And secondarily, I was talking to a customer the other day, and he had that same question that you just did, Dave. What do I do if I'm not open? Well, there's still a million things that staff can do. They can, they can work on social media stuff. They can work on cleaning the restaurant. They can work on, new recipes, get them engaged in your business, so that they're helping you when you do go live. So, if that funds come in a week early, don't leave it on the sidelines, deploy it, get your people working.
And Brian, to that point, there's a lot of online training out there now by way of ServSafe and other entities that are offering free training for employees so they can come back better and stronger, more educated than what they were before.
Those are excellent points, guys. Part of the certification is they're going to want to make sure that the documents that you submit at the end match what you're saying. So this is going to be something where, with the amount of money that they're giving out, I would anticipate that there's going to be a lot of scrutiny and making sure that things match. So I would make sure that when people are filling this out, even though the application is very small, that they are making sure that what they're doing matches their tax forms. So yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we have a question from the audience. Nancy, Jamie, this one's for you. What about using this money to invest in a new property after the shutdown is over? Is that something reasonable?
I mean, it's not going to be forgivable.
Right, not forgivable.
If that's the question. Now, I do think it would be allowable, but it would be allowable in the case of they're keeping the entity going and operating. It's not, hey, I'm going to borrow this money, not use any of it towards payroll, and just use it to buy a new property.
Well, and you don't necessarily have to use it for your payroll costs. It's not like a requirement that you use the funds for payroll, but it is a requirement that you use them for other covered uses like mortgage interest payments, rent, property and equipment leases, utility payments, and for that matter, interest on any existing debt prior to a particular date. You just wouldn't be able to forgive the loan later if you're not using any of it for payroll costs, and that's an important point. So if you're just presuming you're going to get this money forgiven, you're not. On the upside, it's a 1% loan over 2 years with 6 months and no payments. The piper will come, but it's essentially free money. It's like a no interest loan on a car almost. So you have to make a business decision when it comes to that.
Thank you. Real quick on that, just to clarify, if I have a piece of restaurant equipment that I'm leasing, say it's $5,000, and I would buy it outright, that would not be forgiven. But if the lease payments would be forgiven, correct?
I actually don't know the answer to that piece of detail. Can you pay your lease early and pay it off, and does that qualify as a equipment lease payment? I don't think they've specified at that level of detail. I probably could fight through that, but I wouldn't rely on it specifically. I would stick tightly to what they're saying is covered if you're really shooting for the forgiveness of that loan.
And another piece on the rent that we did have answered by the congressman is that it is going to be cash basis in terms of the payments for rent and utilities. Because the question we had was, some of our restaurants, they've been able to get rent deferment for April. And so if they get this money, say in late April or May, can they pay April, May, and June's rent all in that 8-week period? And the answer that he gave was yes, that it can be. So it is not, you can pay 3 months of rent payments in that 8-week period and have it qualify. Now it does have to, it's capped at that 25% of the loan for forgiveness purposes, but it is going to be allowable, which to me actually was surprising. So let's go over, there's some, go ahead.
Sorry, Jamie, I don't mean to keep interrupting you, but we got another question from David. If the loan amount is only 2.5 of the payroll amount and we have only 8 weeks, how are we allowed to add in the rent, utilities amount into that loan amount?
I guess I'm not understanding.
So if I take my payroll and I times it by 2.5, how do I add in my rent and utilities? So maybe my costs are kind of skewed. I have a really high end location, and my cost for my employees is fairly low, and my rent is really, really high. How do I add in that rent cost?
Unfortunately, the loan amount that's calculated how much you get is strictly based on your payroll cost.
Okay.
Now you can then use the loan towards rent, but your rent costs are not factored into calculating how much you receive initially.
Okay.
Yeah.
So economic disaster loans. This is something separate that I wanted to go over. So there's 2 of them that came out related to the coronavirus event. The first one is a loan of up to $2 million that's based on your need. It is a loan though, so there is interest at 3.75%. This particular one is not forgiven. This is if you want to apply because you have a need for more funds. It does have repayment terms of up to 30 years, but this, along with the $2 million, up to $2 million, that's going to be determined when you apply. So it's not that you can get 2 million, it's you get up to 2 million, and then based on your application, your ability to repay, the personal guarantee that's potentially there, that's how they determine how much money you're going to get. There is no formula like there is with the PPP of this much payroll times 2.5. Now, there is no personal guarantee on this though if it's less than 200,000. So that's key as well. But there is one if it's over. There is also, in addition, and this is confusing some people, there is an additional emergency grant of up to $10,000 also through the SBA disaster program. That's a little bit different though, in that the $10,000 does not have to be repaid as long as it goes towards certain costs, payroll costs, rent, utilities, and then there are a couple other costs that they mention due to interruption from supply chain. It's a little bit broader, but it's very important that you keep separate or keep track of what you're paying with the emergency 10,000 grant and what you're paying with the PPP, because although you can have both, they can't be used for the same expenses, and you have to show that you, at least for forgiveness purposes, that you've allocated them to different expenses. One nice thing about this emergency grant, although the customers we've had that have applied for it have not seen it within 3 days, they are supposed to send the funds within 3 days of submitting the application. I don't know if there's some sort of glitch just because there's been so many people doing it, but they are supposed to put the money in your bank account within 3 days. And another nice part of it is if you were denied on the SBA disaster loan, that doesn't mean that you get denied for the emergency 10,000 grant. So
yeah, and just to reiterate, as Brian noted and you noted, nobody moves that fast and things do not seem to be going smoothly, shockingly. And so if you haven't applied, apply. Apply as soon as you can and keep trying to apply.
No, that's an excellent point, Nancy. For all of these, it's very important that our people do this now, just because we don't know how long it's going to take. Everyone had said, for instance, that this PPP, that the funding would be available as of Friday today, and most banks aren't even taking applications yet. So I think it's important that people get ahead of it, apply now, because who knows how long it's going to take. For these disaster loans, your business had to have been in existence for a year, and it's the same type of fewer than 500 employees. So just to reiterate, you can apply for both. I've seen some people ask that say, hey, if I apply for the 10,000 grant, they're telling me I can't participate in the PPP. That is incorrect. They cannot be used for the same expenses, but you can apply and get both. So I'm happy to answer any questions off of here. This is my email for Hillcrest. I'm available anytime. This is something that's very important, I believe, to our customers. So if there's any way that I can help, either or my staff can help with applications or where do I go, please do not hesitate.
And Jamie, I would just add to the commentary about the disaster loan versus the PPA loan, the PPP loan. There will be, if you've gotten a disaster loan already, you can still apply for the other loan. It just will get added over. It'll be like a refinance of the disaster loan into the other SBA loan is the guidance, what the guidance looks like now. So even if you've gotten the grant and a loan already, that loan can be wrapped into the this other loan, this payroll protection loan, and it'll be like a refinancing. So that opportunity is there as well, but they are trying to avoid duplication in that regard.
No, excellent point.
Nancy and Jamie, I got a question. So if I'm a restaurateur, my place is closed this weekend. I have nothing to do. I've watched all the Netflix I can watch. What were the documents that you would put together this weekend to apply for these loans?
I think it's important that you get your payroll. So your 941 forms, that's a quarterly payroll tax form.
Mm-hmm.
You would get together your payroll journal, which is going to show all your wages and tips and everything. It's also going to show your state unemployment tax as well. And then they're asking for financials, the banks are. So I would pull together all of that information. I would even pull the 1099s that I've paid, just because I'd like to have that information. Even if it ends up being not applicable, it doesn't hurt to pull it together. And then I would pull my health insurance premium payments that I've made, if applicable. Same thing with any 401k or any other retirement. And just to be clear on the retirement, it does not include the full payment if part of it's your employee's deferral. It's only the company's match or expense that counts.
Right.
Great. And we have a few more questions from the audience. Does anyone know how we find the status of these loans once we have applied?
I do not. I know on the SBA disaster, when you apply, you are given a confirmation. So you're given a confirmation number that's been submitted and been received.
Mm-hmm.
On the PPP, literally they haven't even accepted applications yet. So I'm sure the bankers will in some way have some sort of acknowledgement, receipt, and then follow up in terms of this is what you're going to do and what you're going to hear next from us.
Yeah, and Brian, as you know, that many of the larger banks are opening portals like the SBA has to submit these loans, and they're using a set group of people internal in the bank to review every one of them. I think one bank told us they had as many as 100 additional people staffed to that group. So I presume they're going to have a feedback loop on that, and that's why they're setting up the portals in the first place. Also to protect themselves from claims of not getting somebody's application in timely.
Mm-hmm.
So
as a side note,
I'd like to answer two of the questions that I see up there.
Sure, go for it.
The first one is, what if you're an LLC partnership and the owners receive guaranteed payments to partners as their payroll? Do they count as payroll? That's an excellent question. We actually posed that, and I believe, although in the regs it does not count guaranteed payments to partners, I believe they will potentially be changing that, because I think it was an oversight on their part. So the congressman that we asked yesterday, they said that had been brought up because there are LLCs out there who pay their partners not with wages, but with guaranteed payments. But the way that it's written now, they're not even mentioned. So that is an open question that is definitely being talked about, but unfortunately I do not have an answer. The other question about, do you need to submit tax returns for these loans or just payroll reports? You are going to be required to submit to your bank backup that includes the 941 payroll reports. So I have seen that on the list of asks from the bank as a request. And so in addition to the payroll reports, they are requesting the 941 tax returns.
Jamie, I had this question from a customer yesterday. What if my credit isn't great? I've been in business a long time and I don't have a great credit. Is that going to be looked at for these loans? And what is the likelihood of not getting a loan because of bad credit?
So the PPP will not be looking at that. But the SBA disaster loan, the one that's up to $2 million that you repay, there is a personal financial statement that is submitted with it. And they do analyze, in addition to your business, your own credit and ability to repay when coming up with the amount that they're willing to loan, if any. But on the PPP, there is no collateral, there is no personal guarantee. And to my knowledge, there is no credit check.
Okay, great. Looks like we may have a question for Anthony. You had mentioned earlier about ServSafe programs. Can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah, and thanks for the question, Jason. I appreciate it. Currently, ServSafe's offering their food handler certification for free if you log on there. They're also doing a separate training video and certification on COVID-19, how to hype up your hygiene program or ramp it up to be better prepared and stop spreading. The only issue with the level 1 certification is also known as food handlers, or what Ohio is going to put into place as level 1 or person in charge. Unfortunately, the Ohio version of this isn't circulated yet. So even if your employees do log on and get the food handler course, it's not going to qualify as the Ohio level 1, unfortunately. But it's better than nothing. And certainly when you're trying to keep people active and get them smarter, this is certainly a good route to do so. But again, great question, Jason. Thank you.
Great. Jamie, really appreciate all that you added here. Nancy, love the comments and the feedback too from your perspective. Our next panelist today is Matt Yorkovich from Yorkovich Debo, and the question that keeps coming up to me, and as it's April 3rd today, what do I do with my rent? I had a functioning operating restaurant up until a few weeks ago. Now I've shuttered my business. I've laid everyone off. I'm doing very little takeout or no business at all. What do I do with my landlord? What do I do with my rent? Matt, I'll let you take it from here. What does a restaurant owner do with their landlord now that they can't pay rent?
Sure, great. Well, thanks for having me, and really appreciate the responsiveness that Hillcrest has had kind of during this time. Nobody knows Brian has like a emergency response team of people that he keeps people like Nancy and I kind of in the loop, and we're sharing information, and kind of it's great to have that across the network. So I appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
I just so I don't forget to say it, I appreciate both you and Nancy. The wealth of knowledge, and I encourage any of our listeners that are looking for great attorneys to reach out to both of you. Phenomenal attorneys, the two best attorneys I know in Cleveland. So
Sure. Well, I'd say the first thing that restaurant owners should do is, if it's not for the first time ever, read their lease. If and times are great and everybody's excited about starting a new business, some of them just sign the thing. A lot of my clients are very surprised when they understand the language that's in their lease. And sometimes the best thing that I can do is help them understand the terms of their lease. But if you haven't talked to your CPA in this time, and you haven't talked to your attorney in this time, then I would hurry up and do both of those things. But the first thing you should do is review your lease. Figure out what your liabilities are, figure out what your default terms are, figure out what your notice provisions are. You have time to cure. If your rent is due on the 1st, how many days do you have before you're in default? If there are any other clauses that would help you at times like this, like a force majeure clause, things like that. Understand whether or not your lease comes with a personal guarantee. So understand the downside risk to a default under your lease, and how could that affect you personally. And so I would say the first thing, read your lease. The second thing, also insurance policies and the existence of any insurance policies. Once you have an understanding of the lease, or you've talked to your attorney about that, you really need to, if you haven't already, reach out to your landlord. They're waiting for the phone call. They probably don't want it, but they're anticipating the phone call. I mean, landlords have been anticipating the March 1st or the April 1st phone call, since March 15th. And so, they're waiting for your phone call. And to be proactive at a time like this is incredibly important. Like all business relationships, it hinges on the strength of the relationship and the negotiating parties between the individuals. But reach out to your landlord. You're going to be requesting either an abatement of rent, a reduction of rent, a deferral of rent, a forgiveness of rent, anything. And, the tenants that are proactive and reach out and are candid with their landlords are going to be a little bit more successful about that.
Matt, I got a quick question right there. That's a great point. Follow up, talk to your landlord, open up the dialogue, make sure you're communicating. But this question's for both Nancy and Matt. What should I be asking for? Should I be asking for 4 months, or should I be asking for, and I've seen this recently, 2 months after everything opens back up? Because there's so many moving targets here. What does it look like as the ask? I'm asking for an abatement of how much time? What have you guys seen, and what do you suggest?
Yeah. Well, what I would say is, first thing you need to do is get your house in order. If you're applying for these loans and things like that, you're already putting together your financial statements and talking to your accountant. It depends, right? We don't know what the market's going to look like, beyond May 1st, right? So in Ohio, we have a shutdown order till May 1st now. But you need to understand what you need. Do you need just 30 days? Do you need 60 days? Do you need 90 days? And then I'll talk a little bit later about, it's not even just this time when the businesses are forced to close, or they have reduced revenue because they're switching to takeout or carry out. But then you got to reopen, and you got to recapitalize, and you got to get new inventory, and get back to those vendors, and maybe hire new people or bring people back on. And so you're also going to need startup capital and a little bit of runway. So for each business, it's a little bit different. And depending on the negotiating and bargaining power and just the attitude of the landlord, it's going to look different in each situation. But I would say, don't ask for a month if you need 3 months. And with each of that, you're going to have to explain to your landlord why they should give it to you, why it's necessary for you, and why it's just not delaying the inevitable. If you ask for, hey, forgive my rent for 30 days, but in 30 days you're still not able to pay rent, a landlord is going to want to know why you need an abatement or a deferral or a reduction of rent, and then what's in it for them. So you really need to come up with a strategy about what you're offering in return. It's just not, hey, I'm not going to pay you for 3 months and you're going to be happy with it. Depending on what you're asking for, there might be a way that you can structure it so it has some benefits to the landlord as well.
Yeah, I mean, Brian, everything Matt said makes a lot of sense to me. You do not want to be the ostrich in this situation and just not pay your rent. You want to see if you can get terms from your landlord if you know you cannot pay your rent, or you cannot pay your rent till a certain amount of loan proceeds come in. And to his point, some of the things that might be palatable to a landlord is if you're paying X amount that might cover some of his costs and not the balance. I hate to say it, they're not turning off water right now. You do have to pay that. Landlords don't like it when you don't, because it goes right to their, it's like a real estate tax. But that being said, you can pick and choose expenses based on that a little bit. You can put rent, just as a practical matter. Try to see if they'll defer it to the back end of your lease, perhaps extending your lease instead of requiring you to pay it the minute you open when you, as Matt points out, need recapitalized. So I think if you make yourself a little list, make yourself a little term sheet of what you might offer that landlord, and, the commitment to stay in longer might be helpful to them. It's, they have a lot of asks, those that are being proactive and trying to offer something at the gate. That may make a lot of sense to that landlord. And I'm going to guess they're going to be kinder to the independents than they are the large tenants. We are, by the way, using the force majeure clauses in certain contexts. Primarily, ours have been in construction and development projects and not specifically in this space, but they have been used effectively now a couple of times in-house at Miller Key and Field. But it depends on your agreement.
Great point, Nancy. Quick question. You hit on it a little bit there. If you have a triple net lease and there's CAM charges, the
Right.
landlord's still on the hook for the real estate taxes. Have we heard anything new on that?
No, and there is no flat out moratorium on evictions and foreclosures, which I'm sure Matt will talk about. But that is a place where I'll pay the CAM because you got to pay those anyway, but I can't pay the rent. Or can you get a deferment from your mortgage, loan mortgage, and pass that on to me? And I'll pay the interest part. There are a bunch of ways to skin the cat. It just depends on the situation.
Yeah, and one of the things I would encourage too is, try to have these communications documented, in writing, whether by email or by letter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because, in the event that this is litigated later, your contract offenses and your facts, you want to be the one that sounds reasonable and sympathetic and honest and transparent and proactive. And if you've got a landlord that's being very stubborn and obtuse and you're able to document that later, then some of your contract offenses or court might just find a little bit more in your favor.
I've talked to 5 tenants that are awesome customers of Hillcrest Foods, and they all told me that the landlord was very reasonable, very understanding. And this, I think, is a big contrast back to the housing bust and how people were more aggressive then. So I think you're seeing landlords very aware and cognitive of the reality of the situation. But to Nancy's point, I think they are going to want to help out local independent restaurants that are really the lifeblood of our economy. So I think the more that you communicate, the more that you reach out, and the more that you keep them aware of what's going on, the better it is for you and your operation.
Well, let's see. If we're talking about other options, I think it just depends on each unique situation. It's really good to talk with an attorney on that too, because you might have an idea and might be overlooking something that they would consider. Other things that we think are really important is that once you do get an agreement with the landlord, it's going to be documented by a lease amendment. So the last thing you want is to have a phone call with your landlord. He says, "Oh, don't worry, no need to pay me." And then, once the dust settles here, you're getting an eviction or you're getting locked out of your space and things like that. When we look at that lease, other things you want to look at, while the governor's order is a request, it doesn't mandate anything to this point. There are states that have put legislation in place to put moratoriums on rent payments, but Ohio so far hasn't done that. We also, the Ohio Supreme Court has only given, direction to the local courts to kind of make their own rules as they relate to eviction filings and things like that. The governor requests that the landlords give tenants a break for at least 90 days and requests that the landlords not pursue eviction for at least 90 days. But there's going to be some landlords that are going to push that. My advice to landlords at this point is you don't want to be on the wrong side of these facts. You don't want to be, the person that's insensitive at this time. But it doesn't mean, we haven't stumbled across insensitive landlords. And so it's going to be try to find a situation that's win-win. If it's just paying their holding costs of their CAM or insurance and tax expenses or things like that, or if it's a percentage of rent, then try to find some things that will benefit the landlord. Like we talked about longer lease terms. Maybe if you have an option to renew and it has a 3% rental increase, see if you can afford, first, I wouldn't agree to it if you couldn't afford it, but maybe take that rental increase to 5% on the renewal or something like that. Or, talk to your landlord about how, the area that they're giving you some additional rope right now is going to help you be a more vibrant and successful business in the long run. No one's going to want to give you a 3-month rent abatement, and then in 3 months, they're looking for a new tenant anyhow, and having to come after you in court for the unpaid rent. So talk about how their generosity at this time is going to help you be a more successful tenant in the long run. Also, hopefully you've had a good relationship with your landlord and you've paid your rent on time, and you've been an asset to their shopping center, for instance, and you've driven foot traffic to other retail tenants. I would talk about those things as well. It really is a relationship, and you want to remind them of the positive history if you have a positive history.
Could I just add to that, that a couple quick things. One, there is at least short-term leverage here on the part of tenants, because as I think we talked before we even started, and Matt mentioned, there are court limitations on what actions are going to be permitted in certain courts and what actions will be addressed. They may have something on file, but nothing may happen for a period of time. So there's a short-term window where you're not likely to be evicted and they're not likely to be able to take actions against you that have any effect. That's not going to be indefinite, but it creates a little leverage for you to negotiate nicely, but directly with your landlord. And I think that's useful. And so not taking too much advantage of the leverage, but noting your leverage. The other thing to be wary of in the lease amendments particularly is the form of any release. What claims they're asking you to release in exchange for the amendment.
Great point.
I've already seen a really broad version of that because we were representing the landlord. And I just want, I want you, that don't ignore what you call boilerplate, all that legalese that the annoying lawyers like Brian and I and Matt put in the documents. That release provision could be a big deal for you. You don't want to release things you shouldn't release, like you have a flood because they didn't maintain something they're supposed to maintain. You don't want to be on the hook for that because you gave a release for this amendment. So I just would look closely at that, or make sure your attorney does if you enter into those amendments.
I got a question from the audience, and Nancy, great points, and you really kind of hit this question already, but I want to kind of bring it up for the audience and help David out here. I'm an amenity in an office building, and my landlord is being a jerk. Everyone else in my building is still in business. However, they all operating from home. Therefore, they're not my customers and coming into my restaurant. I've explained this to my landlord, but they don't care and said that I still have to pay April rent on time. Maybe seeking advice of counsel and hiring one of you guys would be number one. But what do you guys recommend as a course of action?
I'd like to have them say that in writing. Like I said, I would want, if in May, They go to evict me because I haven't paid my April 1st rent.
Mhm.
I want my sympathetic request and reasonable request for some consolation that was essentially, requested by the governor of these landlords to do. I would want their denial of that. And their behavior, whether they're negotiating in good faith or they're being reasonable, I would want that documented, in writing or in an email or something like that. I think with any creditor-debtor situation, you look at the leverage and you look at the opportunities. There's some people that, you're going to pay during this time, and there's some people that you might not be able to pay. I don't see this situation as, if you have the ability to pay it, don't pay it just because, the governor requested a moratorium on payments. Because most of the time, even if you get a deferral of rent, the landlord's going to want that back sometimes. A lot of them force majeure clauses, even if you get a force majeure clause in there and you can use that to, go dark during this period or maybe defer your rent during this period. Most of them, if they're well negotiated, the landlord's retaining the right for that rent that they've abated during this time. It usually isn't a straight forgiveness. And so, if you're eventually going to pay it, maybe you pay a percentage of it now, maybe you pay a little bit now. What you're trying to avoid is, being locked out in the short term. But, my advice to landlords in this period is, they shouldn't be locking out their tenants in this period. And they shouldn't be on the wrong side of these facts. They shouldn't be seen as unsympathetic, unreasonable. There are contract defenses that will be available to you, if the landlord moves aggressively against you, come May 1st. There's a long list of them. And so you don't want to be preparing and peppering the file so that if you're not able to pay that rent and the landlord aggressively comes after you May 1st, that you're adequately defending yourself and you documented the path to do so.
Great point, Matt. This one goes I'll give this one to Nancy. You did everything that Matt suggested. You opened up the dialogue, and they still tell you to pound salt, pay me. What's your recourse after that? What would you suggest?
Look, you do what Matt said, and you document the circumstances, and you document the fact that you are unable to pay that rent without failing to pay other more pressing things, or that you just don't have the funds, and you've notified them of that. Then they do have a self-help recourse. Boy, I'm not sure I would take a self-help approach. We rarely recommend that, except under very particular circumstances. That's your risk here. Otherwise, their option is to go to try and evict you for non-payment of rent. And in Cuyahoga County, that's going to be exceedingly difficult until at least after May 16th, if not later. So what I would say is at least you have time if you don't pay. I would consult an attorney, though, if he takes any self-help remedies. It may be a situation where you get yourself unlocked out as opposed to locked back in. But I would have to see the lease to see how real that is.
And that's what I would suggest too. You want to reach out to an attorney.
Right.
Matt and Nancy are both great attorneys, but at some point you want to open up the dialogue. You want to try to communicate. I never say go nuclear right off the rip, but you just want to consult an attorney and have a dialogue with your attorney as well as the landlord.
And I would be utilizing one or the other or both of the loans that are out there and available to you. At least then you're using somebody else's money for a while to cover the rent costs that they're demanding. Or you can say you've at least applied for those loans and I told you that and you still wouldn't give me a 30-day break. So that's an option too. Great
point. One thing that I was told today by a restaurant that we service and makes great food is that the landlord offered them 60 days rent abatement that they put on the back of the lease, and then offered them to get current with the PPP loan. So people are being reasonable out there. Your landlord may not be, but it's definitely time to push back and protect yourself as a restaurant owner.
Yeah, and some of the landlords might be taking that a stance just to see who actually then just pays it. I mean, at some point, if you're not able to pay it, you need to call their bluff. Because you do have the short-term leverage right now. Brian, you were muted, maybe?
No, I did. Technical difficulties. I'm a true lawyer. Can't figure out
other
the
things I would
technology.
say is, at this time, I wouldn't make any commitments that you don't think are realistic and that you can keep up with. I wouldn't do something, right now where if you have a commercial lease where you don't have a personal guarantee on it, I wouldn't personally guarantee, any additional rent that's deferred, or I wouldn't personally guarantee the debt, or, this is a really tricky time. And I wouldn't take a whole lot of aggressive action without counsel, because you could be setting yourself up for catastrophic liability down the road in that sort of situation. And I think this is, aside from applying, for these economic relief and the stimulus and, the rent abatement, I think this is a really good time to take reflection on the business. If you had a struggling business model, a non-seasonal struggling business model in February, then I wouldn't incur a bunch of additional loans. I wouldn't, guarantee rent to the landlord. I would take this time to kind of analyze your business model, and see what you can do to, if things open up in May, that you can, run a successful business, in June, July, and August. I would, you can't just work on surviving these 3 months and then not have a plan for surviving the 6 months after that. So I would start putting things in place for, startup capital and, lines of credit, moving forward. And, with any of these creditor debtor situations, you have to look at the relationship and, think of all of your creditors at this point and who are the most important relationships. If you have a vendor that you can't survive without, and that vendor can't survive without your payments, then you need to maybe be a little bit more flexible in those situations. And if you get stubborn with a vendor right now and you try to reopen in 3 months and that vendor no longer wants you as a customer, or your cost to go to a different vendor are going to go up, I would say you got to look at each of these relationships, line out all your liabilities, all your expenses, and really do some reflection on that, and figure out what are your important relationships, where do you have alternatives for relationships. If one of these locations hasn't been profitable for you and your margins are absolutely razor thin and you can't get good staff at that location, maybe you need to make the business decision of, that's not a location I'm going to reopen. And now you have a little bit of time to do that. When maybe, normal course of business, you're just trying to keep everything afloat. You might need to take an inventory on your business right now and figure out how you can run a profitable business that's sustainable, even in tough times like this.
Yeah, and for the most part, particularly at the moment, they're not going to evict you in 10 days ever. They're not turning off utilities right now immediately. So taking a breath, as Matt has described, is a really good idea. And please do not jump to emptying what's left of your 401ks or your retirement like mutual funds. I've done enough bad side debt work to see good money being thrown after bad. And it's really important, as Matt said, not to do that right now.
That's a great point, Nancy. I think, now is an opportunity for everyone to hit the pause button, evaluate their business, but also focus on your business and, look at your menu. Let's get the bathroom super clean. Let's clean up the tables. Let's make sure that, we don't have any chips in the silverware and in the china. Like, let's do those things to focus on our business, because things will come back. Things will get better. Can't last forever. It's just the nature of the illness.
If you didn't have an online presence before now,
Absolutely.
You're a fool if you don't have an online presence now. I mean, I see the social media from Hillcrest, every day, and I think it's amazing that you guys are, marketing your customers and things like that. And what I've noticed, a lot of my clients, is their social media presence has ramped up during this time. They've improved online ordering. They're improving things like takeout. They're adding SKUs that are profitable and reducing, they're not selling things that aren't have good margins for them. They're partnering with vendors, to make sure that their vendors are strong during this time. As I look around at those businesses that are getting very creative during this time, those are the ones that I anticipate will be there in July and August and next year at this time as well. So, you really should be increasing, that online presence. You should be fixing, the holes in your systems, and I know a lot of people have laid people off, but, if you do want to reopen, you're going to have to bring that talent back at some point. And so, I'd really focus on that during this time as well.
Yeah,
And
Matt,
I just
those
want
are
to
some.
thank Hillcrest for having me on the webinar. And on a personal note, if you don't have those hooks under your bars for purses to hang, add them while you can.
USB plugs for your phones and hooks for your purses.
Yeah.
No, that's
No, Matt, that was a great kind of segue into. I know next week we're going to be. I'm not sure if this is going to be another webinar if we're recording this, to distribute, but we're going to do some more things in regards to, what do we do with our employees? How do we bring employees back? Keeping engaged with them, keeping the loyalty of your employees while you may be closed or reduced staffed. And we're going to have an expert, panel talking about that in regards to employment and other things you should be doing now to stay on top of your game. So look forward to, that next week.
No, I couldn't agree more. Now's the opportunity for you to reach out to your credit card processor, make sure you're getting a good deal there. Reach out to Hillcrest, make sure that you're ready to reopen. What does this projected open date look like? What are you going to have on your menu? Are you going to retool your menu that's more geared towards takeout? Really talk to your sales reps and ask what we can do to help facilitate the relaunching of your restaurant. Ramp up your social media. I just talked to a friend of mine, Omar, great operator, and he was able to, he had an online presence, obviously, he had social media, but he didn't have online ordering. He was able to get that up into a few days, and is now back up and running with curbside ordering and curbside delivery with online ordering, and he's doing very well. Great operator. I encourage all of you to do the same. A
lot of those Uber Eats and DoorDash and those kind of things, if you weren't hooked into those before, they're offering, some of them are offering commission free and things like that. So you could be adding a whole revenue stream to your business that you didn't have before, that might be a higher margin, more profitable revenue stream.
Well, I want to, and I couldn't agree more, Matt. Thank you for that point. I want to thank Nancy, Matt, and Jamie. We had very few people drop off. If it was just me talking, it would just be my mom on the line right now and you six. So I really appreciate everyone contributing. It's been a wealth of knowledge. This will be posted on restauranttopia.com, and you'll be able to download it on any podcast of your choice. So look for it there. We'll send out some links. We'll send out a copy of the PowerPoint if it's okay with Jamie. And I really appreciate everyone being on today. We're all in this together. If you have any tips or if you need any help, feel free to reach out to me at bsites@hillcrestfoods.com. Happy to help. We are really dedicated here at Hillcrest Foods to helping local independents, and we want to help your restaurant be successful. Whether that's your food costing, your menu items, making sure that you're charging the right amount, to helping you with your social media campaigns. Eat Local Ohio is an amazing Instagram page, and I encourage you to check them out. And we're happy to get you focused and listed on there as one of our sources of restaurants. But reach out to us. We want to help you. Thank you, Nancy, Matt, and Jamie. Amazing information. I really appreciate it. Dave, Anthony, anything else?
No, I just want to mention, please don't be afraid to take any of the resources. We are offering these up in true spirit and in good faith of our customers. I know a lot of businesses are doing the same, but we truly mean it. And we're exhausting a tremendous amount of resources trying to find the answers for our people.
Yeah, no, thanks for that, Anthony. And I think, I don't know what else to add other than, everybody stay safe and wash your hands, don't touch your face, and we're all going to get through this together. Please stay positive, and if you need anything from us, please reach out.
This is a high quality pod. Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Adios.
Thank you for listening to Restaurantopia. The gratitude that we have for each and every one of you spending your precious time to listen to this podcast is immeasurable. Please make sure to tell a friend about this podcast. And also, if you have any feedback for us, visit us on restaurantopia.com and drop us a line. You can also subscribe on your favorite place to listen to podcasts. Thank you and have a great day.